Hello, everyone. My name is Brendan. I'm a Vincentian with the Society of St. Vincent de Paul here in Toronto. And we're here today to talk about being Vincentians and the work that we do here in the Society. But before we continue, I think a round of introductions is in order. So why don't we start to the lady to my right?
My name is Catherine. I'm also a Vincentian here in Toronto, St. Basil's Conference.
I'm Stephen. I am part of the St. Vincent de Paul Society in Mississauga at St. Ignatius Loyola.
Hi, I'm Anne. I've been a Vincentian for almost 3 years, and I am with the St. Francis Xavier Conference in Mississauga.
I am Omar Ellis. I'm also a Vincentian for almost 30 years, and I belong to St. Leonard's in Brampton.
Oh, hi, I'm Jay Nicholson. I'm a Vincentian at St. Basil's in downtown Toronto, and I've been a Vincentian for 7 years now.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We're going to talk about a lot of different things tonight related to the work that we do as Vincentians. And the first topic we're going to talk about is really something that is at the heart of our charism as Vincentians, and that is home visits. And so we're going to start by talking a little bit about why home visiting is so critical to the work that we do as Vincentians. And I think everyone has different ideas in terms of why home visits are so important. So I think I'll throw that question to the group. In your own words, why are home visits so important to our mission as a society?
I think it differentiates us because we're allowed to have a face-to-face engagement with them so that we can exude more than just monetary support or vouchers. We can be part of their experience, and we can extend a certain degree of compassion, kindness, and be that listening ear.
The beauty of going to somebody's home is it actually allows you to walk in their shoes. So you get to find out what their lives are like, and frankly, it's very humbling.
Home visit is like the core of what we do as Vincentians. It is really carrying on a rich history, because at the core and the history of our society is when Frederick Ozanam was challenged by his peers in university to say, "Show me your work." And I think his response, as we all know, is what we do today as home visitation. Also, just to add with what Jay said in terms of when you do a home visitation, it helps to grow you as an individual, helps you to build your empathy. As well, your Christian faith is putting your works in action. And I find that one of the things with home visitation is that it's quietly done. And at the same time too, persons are inviting you into their personal space. And I think that is something that is very unique to what we do, and is something that we should cherish.
What makes them critical for us is it shows the compassion that we have to understand their lives. We're going to them in so many cases where we have neighbors in need. They're always going to someone else. They're going to a social worker. They're going to a healthcare professional. They're always leaving their home. They have to make the effort to get out, to have someone help them. But with the society, we as Vincentians, we go to them. You know, we're trying to make a teeny bit of their life a little bit easier.
It's very unstructured because it's very real. It's life. We are being a part of their day-to-day life. This is not a structured visit or anything that is done by a social worker that you have to give a certain impression. A lot of times you go to a home visit and it is just that, a normal home. And so it's that person-to-person contact. It's that unstructured, real encounter. And I think that is the flavor that grows us as Vincentians in our own spiritual walk.
I want to ask you all, do you remember how you initially reacted when you were first introduced to the idea of home visits? I mean, speaking very briefly for myself, I do, as much as I was excited by the idea, because to the way you described it, Stephen, it is so unique. I really can't think of another service organization where you quite literally walk into people's living rooms to do the work that we do. as much as there are certain things that are, let's say, repetitive about what we do, you know, we visit someone at home, we bring them a food voucher, we bring them a clothing voucher, we connect them with the furniture warehouse, whatever the case may be. Every single visit is different. Every single visit is a very human encounter with between a person who is seeking to serve another and a person who, you know, we've touched on it in this call, you know, sometimes they just want a smiling face. Sometimes they want a conversation. Sometimes they want a sounding board. Sometimes they are absolutely annoyed that you're there and they just want to sign the paper and that'll be the end of that, right? But there's no set in stone way of being a good Vincentian. And all of us as Vincentians, I think, bring who we are as people, how we serve, and how we relate to others to the work that we do. And in that sense, I think it's probably one of the most creative, you know, volunteer ministries I've ever been part of. There's a phrase that we often say, there's no work of charity beyond the scope of the society.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always found that to be such a profound statement because that's been my experience. You know, we encounter need and we're constantly creative around how do we respond to that need? What are we being called to do in this moment with this particular person in this particular situation? And I don't think you really find that anywhere else.
Yeah, it's really it's interesting because it's almost a practice in becoming a Christian, right? Like we're always practicing Catholics. We're always practicing to become Catholic and Christian truly. And I think there's something really interesting about how you really have to have your heart changed through very small daily tasks. And there's a great wisdom in just accompaniment. And just like how we were told in the parable of the landowner of the vineyard, right? Like we're all invited into this great work and everyone's going to do that work in different degrees at different stages of their lives. And like, it's just a whole different process to kind of step back and not to say, my work is great. It's just part of the work, right? Which is part of that big outreach that is supposed to invite everyone into this very non-contractual relationship with God, right? Like we're supposed to be co-creators of a different way of living. And it's quite interesting that can happen by very mundane tasks like getting a food voucher. And there's something really quite simply beautiful about that.
Being a Vincentian has allowed me to practice what I call the ministry of presence. And Anne just said it. Literally, you just need to be physically present. Now, what being a Vincentian over the last 3 decades have done for me is that it has developed me. I grew up from a teenager into young adult with my family and everything. So it has been a part of me and it has allowed me to grow and exercise more empathy with everyone, trying to put yourself into someone's shoe, understanding what they do. And it really has shown me how God works. And so it is that presence that I am there. And just to quickly share, I remember when my brother eventually got baptized, maybe 5-8 years ago. The one thing he said to me is that when he had his conversion story, he never had to question it because he saw me all these years and he knew what he was getting into. And I have never had that conversation with my brother. He's my older brother. But again, it's because of being a Vincentian. And so it's being just exercising the ministry of presence and being able to show empathy just to the world. That's what has changed me.
But I'm saying the same thing there, but for the grace of God go I. We're on a knife edge. And I'm always astounded that I'm not having to face the horrible things that some of these folks have to face every day, every week, every year of their lives. And it's and that's the staggering thing about some of the things that we do, in the sense that there's some things we can't solve, and there's some problems that are so big that it just seemed beyond us to handle it, and yet we're there. And so we do the best we can, and we try really hard, but it's a very humbling experience. And you sure find out the limits of what your limits are and what the limits are, what you can do. And you find that out in a hurry. And you still go back and you still try and help. And sometimes you can't solve it, but sometimes they'll give you credit for just being there. And I think that it's really important to keep doing that. And it's a grind. It's to keep going back and keep doing it. It's a grind because it's it's not necessarily going to get better overnight, but you're making a difference every little day. You're chipping away at things.
I think the big thing for me was, and I think everyone kind of knows it intellectually, but realizing that no one deserves poverty, no one asks for any of the situations. Like, really, sometimes you're just handed an awful deck of cards and you kind of do your best with them. I think there's something really quite important about the realization that like small actions really do make a big difference, and it doesn't have to be anything that's very public. There's a great phrase that, a forest grows very quietly, but you hear the trees when they fall, right? So great acts that are building up a community often go unnoticed, but we often just pay attention to the noisy stuff. Little actions on a day-to-day basis really do make a big difference, and there's a lot of growth that comes through that. And I think that was something that really humbled me, just realizing that everyone involved in the Vincentians work grows very quietly behind the scenes. There doesn't need to be anything that's very fancy about what we do. It just needs to be a very down-to-earth willingness to engage with each other. And I think also to realize that no one deserves a situation, like the luck that you were given or the bad luck that happened to you. Like, no one really has any control of it, and we're just all meant to be part of that big graceful motion of welcoming people back into a sense of relationship, and it's a sense of like we are a community together. Like, no one should be on their own. There's something very simple about that I think kind of gets lost in the day-to-day of trying to do things our own way. But if you're just ministering with other people, it really gets hammered into your head